Hello and welcome to the Roll and Reflect podcast, the podcast where we bring you insights from behind the tabletop and beyond the box. I'm your host, Mark. Devin is away this week, but today we'll be talking with Austin Harrison from Ivy Studio. Welcome to the show, my friend. So good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm pumped to talk.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about your new project, but first, before we get to that, we have this thing we call reflection question. Ooh. And typically it's more broad, but this one is specifically focused towards you and Ivy Studio. But if anybody in the comment wants to chime in and add anything, please do so.
Hi, Austin. Ivy Games makes some of the most beautiful and satisfyingly tactile games on the market. So with an audience that appreciates that, but also an audience that might want something more stripped back, simplified, just the basics, what discussions are had to decide what parts and what games are made more premium? And what is stopping Ivy Games, if anything, from making a just cards and chits game?
All right. Wow, that
was a great question.
Well, it's not only a great question, but it was a very nice question. So thank you. There's a couple of compliments weaved into that question, which
there is. Yes.
So there's a few different directions I want to talk about this question.
Okay.
But the first is that when we started off with Moonrakers, we chose to put metal coins in every box.
Yeah.
And it made it more expensive. And we got questioned about that a lot, and kind of the ethos that IV decided on during that process was we want to make the games that we want to play. And so ever since then, we've had basically a version of the game that's like, this is almost ideal for what we want to play. Now, I say almost ideal because you can always take it way too far. Sure. I'll give you two quick examples of taking it too far. Fractured Sky is our best production to date. It just is. It's
phenomenal.
The magnets are my favorite part. I'm obsessed with magnets. But at one point, I was talking to our manufacturer about the masts of the ships being able to click down and knock the magnet off.
Oh, wow.
And that was just too far. It would have added $30 to every game. Wow. And it was just unnecessary when you could just click it off with your finger.
So cool.
It was so cool, and it was just not there. I had another game. It was in development for a while. It's no longer in development. It may come back eventually. It was a boardless 4X game.
Oh,
so there was no board, but it was a 4X game, and it had cards or whatever that were like regions and. I wanted it to be floating islands. I don't know if you've ever seen those sneakers that have like magnets inside and they float.
Oh yeah, totally.
Like displays.
Yeah.
I was working on this for like there would be like 6 of those and they would float and you'd put ships on them and stuff.
That is so cool.
And our manufacturer was like, "Hey, we just wanted to let you know, like people with pacemakers shouldn't play this game."
Wow. Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know how I feel about that level of magnet. So it's like you eventually hit something that is either too far or just too ridiculous, and that's not where we want to be. Like we're not.
I have to say that is verging on epic, though.
It would have been really cool, but and that's like where we take things, and we're always exploring and trying to come up with new cool things within reason. Like the goal is not how can we make this just as ridiculous as possible. It's how can we make it as awesome as possible within this budget, because we're not trying to make $700 experiences, right? Like normally there's not a market for that beyond just a few people. So I think the furthest we've ever pushed it was the woodboard for Veiled Fate.
That was amazing looking.
Yeah, it's wonderful. We're about to deliver a bunch more of them in January, and the box has been fixed, and I'm just really excited about delivering that. But I'm gonna try to reel it back and come back to this question a little bit, because there's in that question it was people that want those experiences, and then there's also people that don't want those experiences that want to play our game, and how do we cater to both audiences? Well, the truth is that Fractured Sky, the one we just talked about, also had a base game edition that was all cardboard, and most people don't know about it because we didn't sell any of them. and I think there's this balance where, like, if people know that there's this amazing super deluxe edition, they don't actually want the cardboard version. I think there are people. I'm not saying there's not. But broadly, if they're gonna get it, they want to get the nice version. And so they just won't get it if they don't want to pay for the nice version.
Right.
Because we have those in stock. and we sell out of the deluxe and the super deluxe pretty quickly, but we do not sell out of the cardboard one. And I think if cardboard one was the only one, then we'd sell more of those. And I think that's like a little bit. Veiled Fate's also a really good example. During that campaign, we added a cardboard standees version of that game, and we lost a ton of money on it. We just didn't sell enough to have another version of the game, and doing the setup and the all the different things that go into that. We ended up losing money on doing that. And so now that our core audience has come to expect that level from us, unless we're going to Target or Amazon, which is not something Ivy has done.
No, but that was my next question around this, is that if you did go to Target, would you do a cards and chits version?
I think in the next 10 years, there will be a Moonrakers Lite game. It wouldn't be called Moonrakers Lite, but like Moonrakers that is not the expensive version. It's not the nice cards, it's not holofoil, it doesn't have metal coins, it doesn't have player markers or things like that, and it's just the game.
Yeah.
I'm not excited about making that. That's why it hasn't been made yet, right? So that's kind of like where we're coming from. And so I think right now we're always trying to cater to that audience that doesn't want the super deluxe stuff. Like Brink had a base game level that was under $100 that had plastic minis. It just didn't have everything that the deluxe levels had. Right. Even Tend, which we're going to be talking about a little bit more, has a version without the markers and has a version that is more approachable. Now, they're not $30, they're not $40, they're not $50, but they aren't $150. So, yeah. It's a little bit of a middle ground.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah, no, I agree. I prefer...
Thanks, Tim.
100%. Yeah, thanks, Tim. Really appreciate it. I definitely prefer the higher quality, high-end, all the bells and whistles. It definitely is where I want to be.
Yeah, and that's definitely us, too, and we just don't want that to gate people from experiencing.
No, I agree there too, for sure.
So is a lot. It's a lot of what we talk about at the office.
Yeah, totally. So Austin, for those who don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about Ivy Studio and your new project.
Yeah, so Ivy Studio was a video production company that turned into an animation studio that has now turned into a board game studio, which is not a normal progression. No. And I have worked there through all three of those stages. I started off being a business development and project manager, where I'd manage the clients and do all of that. I then went to a animation studio, basically ad agency liaison, where I traveled around the country meeting with ad agencies. And then one day my company, the owners of the company were like, Austin, we want to make a board game division. And I was like, cool. And they were like, we want you to run it. And I was like, what? And since then, they've gone full time into board games too, because we really fell in love with making physical products that people could enjoy long term. We were a commercial animation studio. We'd make something for Nike, and it would last for a month online as an ad, and then no one ever saw it again. And we worked really, really hard on that. And now we make board games that exist for a long time. They last. And so when you hear Zach talk about making things, Zach will say, any game we make, I want it to be someone in our core audience's favorite game. It needs to be their favorite game. And so
I love that.
We're trying to always push the limit and to find things that we think will delight our audience. And that's a blast for us. We have a blast doing that. And a lot of times that means we're making our favorite games because we think that our audience likes the kind of games that we like. And so we're trying to make the coolest games we possibly can. And that's not always easy. It takes a really long time sometimes. But as far as me, I am a weird role. Technically, my game title is head of games, but that makes me sound more important than I actually am. I'm not doing money decisions about things. I'm mostly doing development of games and working with content creators, and then basically anything else that needs done, because I've done all the positions at the company. I kind of just pitch in and help all the different places.
Cool. Great. Well, tell us about your new project, man.
Yeah. So Tend is perhaps the game I disliked the most during development and love now. You're farming an alien world. You were just sent there by this big corporation called the Zenith Corporation, and you land, and you're basically having a Stardew or a game like that, like a farming sim type.
It totally has that vibe for sure.
Yeah, it has that vibe where I'm farming and I'm chopping the woods and I'm exploring a mine and I'm raising animals and I'm fishing, which might be my favorite part. And I loved Stardew Valley. And so the experience of doing that in a tabletop experience is just, I really, really love this game. And I didn't at first because there were just a couple of like things that we hadn't quite figured out how to make all the mechanics mesh together. And I think it irked me so much because I love this like genre or like theme so much. I was like, I'm not getting the feeling. And once that feeling clicked, it went from like least favorite, bottom of the pile for me to like top shelf, top favorite game. So it's been a really, really fun journey of development. But the game technically is a flip and write, but I think it might be the biggest flip and write.
I would agree.
Ever
Absolutely.
made. Not like big as in like, oh, it's the best one ever, but
but there's a lot.
It has
to
a
it.
lot in it. It's got a scratch off card where you're scratching stuff off to explore the woods and the mines. It's got stamping markers where you're playing a little polyomino game where you're filling up this cargo manifest. It's got apps that let you play with people that aren't with you in where you're sitting, or play with a huge group of people and throw that up on the TV. It's got an app that replaces the scratch off card if you don't like the idea of scratching off. What am I missing? It has dice that you roll, dice that you don't roll.
It's true. Yeah, I mean,
it's got a lot going
all
on.
the things. It's like you threw everything in the bucket,
Yeah, and I think that's been our biggest challenge of like messaging this game is how do we convey that it's a flip and write, but not a flip and write like you're used to playing. And honestly, I don't know if you've seen just like the content creators' feedback. Yes. Quite a few people have said this is the first flip and write I liked. Like that was a quote that we got again and again.
That's exactly the same with me. Roll and writes, flip and writes, whatever. They're just not my kind of game.
Right.
So, but Tinned I loved.
Well,
absolutely. I had a blast. I just had a blast. So I'm playing again this afternoon, and I get to film my preview in the next day. So I'm excited because this is generally not a style of game I would gravitate towards. So I think you really hit it out of the park.
Well, thank you. It's the biggest surprise as far as like content creators. Like we just didn't know what to expect because normally when we're working with someone, it's like a social deduction game or a strategy game or something with negotiation. So like people have come to like expect that style game from us. Yeah. And so when we sent this out, we're like, I hope that they don't just assume it's going to be something else than it is because of who's sending it to them. And it's by far the best reviewed game. Like I think Tom from Dice Tower said it was his favorite. He said Smurf and Write technically, but I didn't know if people would know what that is. So we asked him if we could change it to flip and write. And then, I think that Jenna from Board Game Garden was another big surprise because she loves Hadrian's Wall. So we were like, we don't know where she's going to list this. So I'm excited that she really loved it. But the list goes on and on. So
that's awesome. Well, I noticed that within the rule book and other places, you kind of named it this cozy kind of farming game, right? So could you just elaborate on that and what it means and how you might think it differentiates itself from other types of farming games?
Yeah, it's so funny because normally I wouldn't put cozy and strategic.
Right, that's why I definitely had to call it out.
I never would normally do that, but it was something that we heard a lot from playtesters. Like, it feels really cozy, and I think it's because even Stardew feels cozy, but like you have very limited amount of time every day to do the stuff. Yeah. And that kind of feels like Tend because you can't try to do everything in the game. If you try to do everything, you'll score. You can, and you'll score very low.
You definitely have to pick a path for sure.
You got to pick a path, and usually it's like a minor path and a major path. That's your best strategy. But as far as cozy, I think it's just because it's very, it's got the thematic elements of whatever you're doing. It's like I'm raising animals, I'm planting crops, I'm going fishing. And I think it's also cozy because there's not tons of expectations on you, right? Like people aren't like looking over being like, oh, like you did that? Like, why'd you do that? It's just like I have this sandbox that I get to play in. And yes, I'm going to compare at the end how I did on score. But generally, the games, once you get going, like I could play a solo game in 35 minutes. Yeah. So once you get going, once you've played a good bit, you really get to try out a bunch of different strategies, and there's low pressure, and I love that progression that the game takes. And so that's why I think it's referred to as cozy. Is it is highly strategic, and there is pressure on you because you only have so much time, but the pressure isn't judgmental pressure, if that makes sense.
Yep, I agree. So So you kind of touched on already that, you weren't sure about this game or whatever, but what inspired the creation, right, of this game, and where did it come from, and how did it evolve to what it is now?
Yeah. Oh, this is a fun story. So, have you heard of the mobile game Dots or Two Dots?
No.
All right. So this was a mobile game that was popular. The first one was popular like 10 years ago, maybe longer.
Okay.
But just a really fun little mobile game where you're trying to make squares on like a grid of dots. And it became very popular, and Zach became friends with some of the designers while we were working on a game called Bouncy Smash. Bouncy Smash was an IV product. It was our first app. And it was something that was really, really fun. Didn't make any money.
Oh, I don't think I even knew about this.
Yes, I'll have to show it to you next time we hang out.
Okay.
But it was a blast, and so we made some friends. Well, one of the friends that we made through that was like, hey, I got a friend that is making board games. He also works at Dots. Would you guys want to meet up? So Zach met up with him and played his game, and that was Tend. It looks very, very different now because this is like a year and a half ago.
Sure.
And so once Zach played it, Zach was like, I think I could see this being an IV game. Would you be interested in joining our development team and developing it with me, Zach, and Max? And so we've been developing it for that was before PAX, maybe even before Gen Con last year, but we didn't really start working on it until like October, November last year. So we've been developing it for about a year since then. But he's been developing it for 3 years, 4 years. It was a pandemic game. So it's
Okay. It's been in development for quite a while then.
Yep. Yeah, definitely has. And so I think the core, the heart has always been there of like this like, farming experience and that I think there were some things that worked really, really well from a solo mode standpoint because of the development being pandemic that really needed to be changed to work for a multiplayer standpoint. And then just like quality of life changes, balancing and stuff like that. That's really hard to do on your own. And that's why I love working in a team. So Toby, I was worried, like working with another designer that we didn't know very well, wondering if he would mesh well. But there's a certain level of humility that you have to have when you design with a group, because there's going to be parts where your ego is telling you it needs to be this way, and you have to listen to the group and play test the other way, even though you might not agree. And Toby fit right in. Toby's a gem.
Nice.
And so it was a really nice development process.
Cool.
So yeah,
that's always good to hear that you're really happy with where the whole process through all the way through to the end. So
yeah. At the beginning of the game, I was like, guys, there's a lot of problems. Like I can't put my finger on what I don't like. And through the whole process, all four of us were able to iron out all those problems, and it turned into something that I love.
That's awesome. So we talked about the cozy feeling, right? But what is it that you hope players walk away with? How do they feel after playing this game?
I think one of the best things a game designer can hear is, I want to play again. Yes. Right? Immediately, I want to play again. And that has been executed really well in Tend, where they just immediately like, okay, well, I didn't fish last time. I want to try fishing. Let's go in. And I think that's because the game is too big to try everything. And even if you have tried fishing and, let's say a fishing animal combo or a fishing chopping combo, the cards that come out will make the game very different because there's 3 objectives and there's a bunch of different of those. I think in the final version of the game, there'll be 12 different objective cards for each season. There's 3 seasons. And then also the task cards that comes out. There's a lot of different task cards that have different bonuses and stuff. And I actually think that my favorite type of game is a game where you can't play the same strategy every time. If you play the same strategy every time, it just won't work. You won't win. And there's some people that don't. They want to play the same. They want to find the code break, right? And they want to like do it. But the best way to win in Tend is to react to the cards that are coming out and the board that you were given and kind of adjust your strategy to fit those things. Because a lot of the combo chaining is getting fulfilling like requirements on cards. There's a card that has a task at the top, has a requirement. If you meet that requirement, you get the thing at the bottom, which is either another task or more bonus like goods or something. And so being able to fulfill those is a huge part of winning. Not to say you can't find a favorite strategy and be like, oh, I'm really good at mining and fishing. Like I've got that figured out. That will for sure help you score well. And we did a challenge, and we're going to do more challenges throughout the campaign. But I played a game. Me and Max played a game. We put that seed in our Kickstarter update, and you can literally play the same game me and Max played on TTS because the cards will come out the same exact way because of the app that Zach made called the Companion app. And
so cool.
I was like, oh man, I scored pretty good. 160, I got 163 or 168. Like it's not amazing, but it's not bad. There's already like 7 people that have beat my score. So I was like, dang it, that sucks. But it's because I didn't react as well to the cards as they did. I went in, I was like, I really want to do animals and chopping. And I did those things, and at the end of the game, they crushed me. So, and it's really fun to be able to do that kind of thing, where it's not just a solo mode, or it's not just a solo experience, but there's challenges where it's like, I bet I could figure out how to beat Austin's score.
Right. I like that as well. That's a really neat aspect to the game overall, for sure. For me, that's one of the things I really liked, is that I like games that force me to react and pivot perhaps from what I was trying to do. Oh, this might work better now. And it definitely has that in there for sure. Thanks, so, man. That's one of the things that worked really well for me. So it has this flipping right mechanic, right? But you have all those things. You talked about it briefly, how you can't do all the things, but between the chopping and mining and fishing, how do you take these tasks, and how do you create this immersive farming experience in an alien world where how you blend the right amount of what you're doing?
Yeah, it's funny because it really, I think it depends on like buy-in from the player a little bit, because just based on feedback from our playtesting and our content creation, people will be like, this is the most thematic game I've ever played. And some people are like, oh, it's just, I'm just like flipping dice, I'm rolling dice, I'm stamping. It doesn't feel that thematic. And it's like, well, do you want to have this experience of farming and feeling like you're in a Stardew like world?
Yeah.
And so for me, I think that I love that. And so when I'm building out my farm and stuff, it feels very visceral, and it feels very like that same feeling. And so I love that personally. And a lot of the people that have played it have. And then every once in a while, we're just like, oh, it's so funny to get the same quote or the opposite quote from different people. Like, really definitely. Highly thematic and like kind of thematic.
I definitely could feel the theme through it for sure. I mean, obviously there are mechanics that you would recognize and so forth, but the theme definitely conveys itself as you play.
So I am a mechanics first designer. That's how I design. Toby is a theme first designer, or at least he was on Tend. Yeah. And so it definitely, if you were feeling that, is because of Toby, not because of me.
Either way, it's like our collaborative effort.
One of our most thematic tied-in games, I would say, is Veiled Fate, right? Like, you're a god, you have demigods, like all that stuff is happening, it all meshes together. Yep. That did not exist. The game existed before any of the theme in that game.
That's awesome.
And then we had to struggle to figure out, okay, what theme works for this?
Well, you did a good job applying the theme, because sometimes games can feel very tacked on, just like, this takes place on a moon. Well, okay.
Yeah, and that's hard to do. Like, I have some grace for people that where I'm like, the theme's not perfect, but the game's fun.
Yeah. Well, with all the different tasks and different multiple paths to victory, right? Like the badges, the season goals, and the cargo manifest scoring, what are some of the interesting strategies you've seen and have developed over time? So
I think multiple paths to victory multiple paths to victory was the hardest balancing thing for this game.
Yeah.
And it still is ongoing, but it's much better than it was. Where when we released it to open playtesting, basically beta level playtesting, so people outside of our team playing alone without us. And that we got one guy who's this amazing Discord mod. His name's Zach. He's just breaking scores. Like, my highest score ever was 206. He scored a 380. Wow. Right? So like, I was just like, okay, what are you cheating? Like, this feels like you're not playing right. So we sat down and watched him play, and we're like, okay, well, you're not cheating, so we just suck. And so we had to start figuring out, okay, how can we bring your broken strategy back within the fold of believable scores and adjust that without ruining that task for people that are just getting started. Because if you nerf it too much, it doesn't look like it's valuable at all for first-time players. And so we've really developed I think a way that it does fit together really well, but there are some things you shouldn't do. For instance, animals and farming, a little bit is fine, but doing them both as much as you possibly can is a terrible idea, because of that polyomino game I mentioned earlier. When you're filling your cargo manifest, you want things that are different stamps than each other touching. If they're not not different stamps, you can't put them in there. And so if you have all that green coming in, because those are both green stamps from animals and crops, it's just not going to fit into your cargo manifest very well. And so you have to make decisions around that kind of thing. But generally, going chopping or mining is a good idea, and then paired with something else. So I love going mining and fishing. I love going chopping and fishing. I love going mining and animal tending, or chopping and animal tending. It's really funny how the game just develops over time, and how strategies become more prevalent. Because I always thought, okay, to get a high score, you have to upgrade either your pickaxe or your axe, or sorry, your pickaxe or your axe for chopping or mining. And recently I played a game where I didn't do either of those things, and had a wonderful score. And I was like, man, I really thought that was a must-have. And so the game will allow you to explore and figure out the pathways that you want to take. But there's also some things like you'll figure out that are like, oh, okay, this is necessary. Like if you're going fishing and you don't upgrade your rod, you're going to roll a lot of blank spaces and not have a good time. You need to upgrade your rods in order to start fishing. So there's a lot of things like that they become apparent pretty quick.
That's awesome. So, within that, right, we have this unique neighbor phase that you have going on in the game, right? Where you can share resources with each other and so forth. So what inspired that to bring that into the game? Was that early on, or did you have that late, or what was the path?
I don't think that was early on, but my memory's not perfect. It was definitely developed with the team as a whole. And I think, one, we just love player interaction at IV. Good. So that's a big thing for us. And even in a flip and right, we wanted there to be some player interaction, but also player interaction that didn't just like wreck your experience. I love Cartographers. Cartographers is up there for me. It's a great game. And I think that the drawing shapes in other people's things works really well for that game. But like someone coming and messing up your farm, does not work for this game, right? Yeah. And so to be thematic and to feel like, the farming games that we love, we wanted them to be positive player interaction experiences, and also reward you for doing the positive player interaction. Right. And so that was a really hard balance, and I'm really happy with how it turned out.
Yeah,
they get something, you get something. Yeah, it's sharing's caring. Yeah. And the funny part is that we were trying to figure out, okay, how do we actually incentivize it? Well, the blueprints that you need to upgrade your tools, that's the main place to get them, is the neighbor rewards. And so people really are like, okay, well, I have to be a good neighbor because I need to upgrade. Otherwise, I can't upgrade stuff. So it made it kind of jump into a pretty common strategy to focus on early on.
It really is.
But yeah, I don't remember when it was developed. I know it was definitely something that the team identified as wanting player action pretty early.
Yeah, cool. Well, can you give folks kind of a walkthrough, a quick typical turn? What do you do on your turn?
Yeah, so at the center of the board, or if you're using the companion app on the screen, there's 5 cards that are face up called tasks. And they will range from fishing to chopping to mining to tending, which are the 4 main actions. And you get to select 2 of those cards, and they'll allow you to go down to your sheets. You have 2 sheets. One is a really colorful farm sheet, and one's a more spreadsheety type sheet that's more for scoring. And you are getting to execute those tasks. So if I was farming, I might plant some animals, I might till some ground, I might water some crops, and that will allow me to get goods that I am going to either sell for money to upgrade things or buy things, or put into my cargo manifest, which is going to score me points. When I go chopping and mining, I'm going to be scratching off on a scratch off card. I'm going to be using the app. So we have a full app that you can see here, which,
yes.
If you're not watching, if you're listening, I have a grid on my phone where I can explore in the mine and the woods. And so it allows you to find goods in the woods of the mines, and I can use those to upgrade things again, or I can put some of them in my cargo manifest. And also, if I get to the bottom of either of those locations, I'll unlock new fishing spots. And fishing, you start off with a 5x5 grid, you roll d6s, and it will give you a number, and you line up where you're at. If you roll a blank, you get nothing, and so you want to upgrade your rod, which gives you a grid that you're fishing. So if I roll a 3-3, I'd have 2-3 above that, and 2-3 on either side. So you get a bigger area that you're fishing in, and you can also collect more than one fish if you upgrade lures. And so all those tasks are basically designed to either get me money or to allow me to get a good that I can score points with. And that's what you're doing simultaneously with everyone else at the table. So there's very little downtime unless you have someone that's just really plagued with analysis paralysis.
Sure.
And the party mode, the companion app that I was talking about that holds those cards on the screen, has a timer that you can use as well, which helps bring it down.
Right.
When we play with a very large group of people, we use the timer.
Yeah, makes
the largest group I've ever done in person to date is 18, but I think I'm breaking that this weekend. So,
that's impressive. I haven't played with more than 3 yet.
Yeah, well, it's a lot harder when you're not at like a conference or something.
Yeah, right. That's great. So you talked about fishing being one of your favorite aspects. What is it about fishing that is so cool?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different types of fish in the game. Okay. And I think what I love about it is trying to, one, mitigate my dice rolls by getting the better rods and the lures that allow me to catch more fish. But two, also the active collection. You talked about badges, which I didn't talk very much. There's these badges that they require goods to basically unlock them, but they're worth points at the end of the game, end points in your cargo manifest.
Yeah.
And so the badges have like, you need these 3 types of fish, and there's a basic badge, an advanced badge. That part feels very Stardew Valley, the community center. And I love that in that game. And so I think that's why I like the fishing strategy. Also, it's a really great way to fill up your cargo manifest quickly, because once its engine is built up, you can collect 3 fish a round if you're using energy bars as well. Energy bars basically just give you an extra action. And so it can be really strong.
Yeah, cool. Well, obviously you talked about Stardew Valley being kind of an inspiration to some degree, but the art and atmosphere here, it is beautifully done, for one.
Thanks.
And it conveys the homesteading and exploration feeling for sure. But how did you settle on that?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the animation studio. I'm really blessed to work for Zach, who just kind of can pull worlds out of thin air and has a really good eye for artists. So he'll put a mood board together. He'll find an artist. He'll convey that mood board to them, give them creative direction. And so this is actually a friend of ours named Kelly. Kelly crushed the art on Tend.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And just did an incredible job. But Zach really has just a pretty big skill set of directing commercials for, everyone from McDonald's to Nike to Amazon to Reddit. Like it's all over the place. So he's got that history of art direction and that eye for creating things, and that's a huge asset on our team. And it's why things look good. It's definitely not me. Things would look like stick figures if I was in charge, Mark. So
same here.
So that's why our games, if you think our games look good, it's because of Zach. Yes.
Nice. So what's that collaboration process like with Zach and the artist? And are there things that come up you're like, oh no, that's wrong, we need to go back?
Every once in a while there's a piece of art where I'm like, that person's hands are so scary. Why are they so scary? For Veiled Fate especially. I love it. Every once in a while we'll get scary hands. I'm like, that's a friendly character. Why do they have scary hands? And so yes. So Zach generally gets feedback from the whole team during the mood board phase. Yeah. But after that, we're off to the races, and it's little things. So the spaceship in the top left corner of the 10 box, which I don't have here, started off very bulbous and round, and it didn't look like it would hold cargo at all. I was like, this doesn't fit for me, guys. Like, I care a lot about spaceships, and this is not the right one. And so, like, feedback like that, like, it's a lot of, like, back and forth with the team, but Zach is largely managing the process with the artist. And honestly, there's very little feedback from me on art. It's more just like, that doesn't fit in the universe type stuff that I'm providing, because I'm not qualified to be an art director. But yeah, so Zach's making a lot of decisions. And then there's lots of fun stuff that Zach and the team want to do that. So for instance, the Super Deluxe game, there's 9 starting cards that just it's the biggest card of like the action, because it doesn't have the secondary action that you could take. And so it's just a blue card with the action on it. And so we hired Kelly to make custom, really nice illustrations for those 9 starting cards. That are now only in the Super Deluxe game, and they were made holographic, and so they just look way cooler and way nicer and are fun. And so little things like that Zach loves throwing in art-wise for the Super Deluxe editions.
That's awesome.
So I don't know if I answered your question super well.
Oh, that was good. So for the development process, though, what would you say was your biggest challenge that you came up against?
Balancing a game with this many levers is hard.
I bet.
Because you make one, you make tending better because people are underutilizing it. and then suddenly it's scoring 300 points. And then you have to wheel that in.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we made this one better, and now it's scoring 400 points. Like, okay, now how do we fix this?
Yeah.
And there's a strategy called Woods Explorer that was one of the projects that you could do, and it doubled the value of all your badges. And people were breaking the game with that. And now for the final version, it doubles the value of one of your badges.
Well, that's much better, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's much more believable. And so it definitely, balancing was the hard part on this. Also, I think there were elements that we loved in the game that were holding it back, and that's every game I've ever designed. And for this one, when we started development on it with Toby, there was a first player mechanic. And actually we have, in your version, there's a first player coin, Mark. That's not going to be in the final game. It's like beautiful, right? It's probably my favorite coin we've made. It's this beautiful
teal. It's so cool.
Coin. So you keep that, Mark. That's just for
you. I will.
Because the first player got to select the one of the cards that would be in the row next round.
Right.
Which was really fun. It was almost like a deck builder. You got 3 options. You got to choose the direction the game went.
Yep.
The problem is, if that happened, the first player would see their card that they chose way more than the player that went 4th or 5th that chose a card.
Sure, that makes sense.
And so the best strategy was follow whatever the first player was doing for the whole game.
Right.
Because they were choosing bonuses that would help them. And we tried some other versions of it, and it just didn't work. In fact, the final version we tried of it is still on your sheet. It's called the I can't remember what it's called. It's the top left part of your sheet.
I can't think of it without.
Anyway, it's gone now, so people don't need to know.
It doesn't matter.
Basically, it lets you choose from 5 unused cards and put one in there.
Right.
And in all of our playtesting, I saw it used once by a person playing a first-time game, and we're like, this just isn't helpful. It's actually more confusing than it's worth. And so now that top left section is you just get an extra action, an extra task, if you pay the gold for it.
Yeah, an extra task, not action.
Not an extra action. That was another really hard distinction, is teaching people the difference between task and action.
And I did that too. And you had to no, you need to change that. I'm like, oh, right. Yep. I'm so used to saying actions, right? So
yeah, well, it's just because a task can give you one or two actions. And people were just getting super confused about it.
Yeah, I totally understand that, because I also felt like that. So you talked about playtesting. What was something that came out of playtesting that was unexpected, or changes that occurred from that?
Oh, so many.
So many. What was your favorite then?
Yeah, so we already talked a little bit about the Woods Explorer doubling the badges. That would have been my main one I talked about. The other one was people, when we started playtesting, I didn't think it was possible to have a good game by doing both chopping and mining. So basically just the scratch-off card being your main strategy.
Yeah.
And these people were doing that at the start of the game, unlocking all the fishing areas and getting both lures in the game, which we had never done before getting to that level in playtesting. No one in the playtesting core for the alpha playtesting had ever gotten both lures. And Zach, again, got both lures and was catching 3 or 4 fish every time he took the task action. And that is on a game where you're supposed to be catching 1 or 2, maybe 3 on an amazing thing.
Right.
It was just so many fish. He had more fish than he knew what to do with. At the end of the game, he was just selling fish because he didn't know what to do with them. And so it was broken. And it was fun because he was like, man, I caught 400 fish. And I'm like, well, you really should only be catching 20 fish in the game.
Exactly.
So,
that's awesome.
But yeah, that was one of the biggest things we changed.
One of the things you touched on was this whole beat my score, right? The community challenges and beat the team score. So how has the community responded to this feature? And also, is this going to be something that will always be part of the ongoing life of Tind?
Yeah. So how they responded to it, we're going to see, because the world of solo mode, I'm not a solo mode gamer. I do enjoy playing 10 solo mode. This is a first for me.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things they are asking for a campaign or something like that. And we may do that down the road, but it's definitely not going to be part of this campaign. A part of IV delivering quickly and on time is the fact that we're usually done creating things by the time the campaign comes around. And so whether or not they like the challenges is yet to be seen. We'll have to see. I am planning on it being a part of it because I love the idea of this 10 companion app basically being a time machine, right?
Yeah.
You can go back and play a version of the game I played yesterday, I played with you right now, and we're playing on Zoom, or I played 20 years ago, right? Obviously, 20 years in the future you'd have to play because it didn't exist 20 years ago. But and I think that it's unique in this space. I don't think there's anything else that can simulate a random seed of cards. Basically, what it's doing is it's taking out shuffling from the game and giving the exact same cards that I got when I played. Yeah. And it allows us to have the same ecosystem to compare scores in. And I think that's super fun. And so yesterday we launched my score for a solo game that I did and a Max did yesterday, and they already beat all of our high scores. Like I'm happy about that.
See, that's awesome.
I'm also a little miffed that it was too easy to beat my high score. But so in the rule book there will be a list of seeds and what we scored, and so you can do that. There will be forums on our Discord and in BGG where you can compare scores. The only downside to getting it larger community is like it's super easy to lie about your score no matter what game you're playing.
It's true,
so it's but like, I scored 400. Like, cool, bud. Glad you're number one in the world.
That's pretty cool, though. I love the fact that you added this in. It's really another level to the game itself. So speaking of that, moving towards the future, I mean, obviously you're still in the campaign for 10, but do you have ideas and plans for the future to extend 10 beyond?
Yeah, I think for a hot second there, it was going to have like a small campaign. This is early development. We were planning what it would be like, maybe like in a My Island sized campaign. I don't know if that's the case anymore. It's not in active development, I can say. I know for a fact that there's at least 2 expansions that Toby wants to put back in the game. There was a really fun cellar element to the game a long time ago where instead of putting good directly in your manifest, you could put it in the cellar and it would age it and it would make it better. Yeah. But you'd have to invest the time to do that. So you could put an egg in there and it turned into mayonnaise. You could put wheat in there and it would turn into beer. And you could invest time and energy into building the cellar, and then it would help you turn products into bigger products. That's pretty neat. I think he'd love to bring that back. So things like that where we definitely have stuff coming down the road.
Cool.
And then it's also one that I hope does really well at delivery, and there's a big need for the deluxe editions to come back, because the deluxe editions are crowdfunding exclusive. So for sure. We may bring those back after delivery. We'll see.
Okay. Cool.
There's a really big balance issue with like bringing something back right after it delivers.
Yeah,
either everyone wants it and it goes nuts. I think the best example of that is Orange Nebula's Unsettled second campaign.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that was one for sure.
I mean, they delivered and then it did $2 million right after. I think that's pretty rare. I think it's better to give it a year to let people play it and to share it with their friends and
see it at conventions and all that kind of stuff. So
I don't think it'll launch quick.
But at least you're thinking for the future for it is kind of what I was wondering. So beyond 10, then, what are some other things that you can talk about that you're starting to brew and work on for the future for 2025?
We have a new game set in the Veiled Fate universe that's coming out.
Cool.
It's much smaller. I can't talk too much more about that.
Okay.
We have a game that is in development right now that's like manipulating I'm really loath to use the word election because of where we're at in our timeline.
Right.
But it's much more like thematic medieval. You're like manipulating the like ascension to a throne, kind of. And so we're working on that. We're always working on expansion stuff. So Mythic Mischief Volume 3 and a Fractured Sky expansion campaign are down the road.
That's cool.
And so I'm excited about those things coming in the future. But
cool.
Other than that, we always have too many ideas.
Yeah, this is true. So even beyond that, then, what are some of your dreams, your goals, something that you haven't even started, but you would love to try and do?
I have not playtested or even started playtesting it. I have a time travel bag building game.
Oh, yes. Sign me up.
So I love like Quacks of Quedlinburg.
Yep,
it'd be like Quacks meets Furnace meets maybe It's a Wonderful World, and then add in time travel.
Yeah. Cool. I love it. I think it's awesome. Well, those are the main questions I had for you today. Before we move on to the next segment, though, tell folks where they can find more information about Tind.
Yeah, so it's live on Kickstarter, and it will be until the 15th of November. And so that's probably the best place, but our Discord is always a wonderful place to find more information. But I think Kickstarter has the most, and it's just Kickstarter/project/Ivy/Studios/Tend. So,
great.
And if you go to the main page and you type Tend in, TEND, it'll come up.
All right. Well, cool. Well, thanks so much. So let's move on to the Beyond. Now, this segment, Austin, is for you to talk about something you're super excited about. It could still be board game, but we kind of reserve this spot for things that you might want to talk about that are beyond board gaming.
Yeah. So I'm very excited that the Brandon Sanderson Stormlight book is finally coming out next month, which is very soon. I'm looking for the actual date, but it's the next Stormlight book. I think it's Wind and Truth.
Okay.
And I'm really, really excited about that because I'm a big Sanderson fan. His books are very big and he's very fast writer, but he's writing a lot of different stories. So this one for me, I think it's been 2 or 3 years waiting for this one. So I'm very, very excited about that.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm a big audiobook guy, so that's on my list for sure.
Yep.
His stuff is just so good always, Yep. Do you have a favorite so far of his?
Do I have a favorite? Oof.
Yeah.
Stormlight 1 or 2 is probably my favorite.
Okay.
I'm going to go with 1. So that would be Way of Kings.
Nice.
But I just finished Sanderson physical book, which I don't read that many physical books anymore, but it was the Wizard's Handbook.
Oh yes, I haven't dived in. I have that on my audio list, but I haven't dived into it.
I'm going to get the Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England. It was not what I was expecting. I was expecting actual wizards. It was not actual wizards.
Oh, okay.
Just to give you fair word of warning.
All right. Well, I have it
love
queued
the
up.
book,
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It
was
cool.
super fun.
Well, for me, I haven't really done anything with it yet, but I just got the Super Pocket Atari Edition. So this is looks like a Game Boy, a little bit bigger, but it's a handheld device, and it comes with like 50 old school Atari games, but it's also compatible with the Evercade cartridges. So literally 500 plus games you can get for this thing, and each cartridge can hold like from 2 to like 20 some games. So I'm pretty excited about it because again, the whole nostalgia for me is just huge for that kind of stuff, right? And plus, traveling and on a plane, it'll be great.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of my Atari games. I definitely played Pitfall.
Oh my gosh, yes,
a lot, and the bowling game.
Yep, bowling. Oh, I played so much bowling. I was in a bowling league, so I loved it.
Yeah,
as a kid, that was my sport.
Did they have like Galaga or Galactica, or was that outside?
They had like games that were similar. Like Demon
Yeah.
Attack and different ones like that were
right,
very similar, but not actual.
Not
like
actual
you'd
ones.
see Galaga, right?
Yeah.
But any of their stuff they tried to do, like Pac-Man was just not. It was just a whole different version of Pac-Man.
Right.
So, but I'm excited just because it's this little handheld device, and it's got all the one I picked was the one with all the Atari reds and blacks and all the things you'd expect from Atari there. So so that's a really fun little thing, and I'm thinking about doing like a video review, which I don't really do with anything at all anymore. Yeah, so typically I'm just doing previews these days, but I'm pretty excited about this little device. So
that's awesome.
See how it goes. And just the possibility of all the different carts, and there's still new carts coming out for it. So all kinds of different manufacturers, and it's just compatible with all of them. So that's really cool.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's our Beyond segment. Well, Austin, thank you for being here so much. I appreciate it. It's great having you on the show. We'll definitely have you back for sure. So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So folks, if you want to see more of us, subscribe on YouTube to the Roll and Reflect channel, and so you can keep an eye out for all the new episodes and so forth, but also listen to we're everywhere you can find podcasts and all that. So you can follow us on our social medias, Roll and Reflect or Roll and Reflect Podcast, and special shout outs here. We got to give a big shout out to Tim for the reflection question. That was a great question. And for Laura for the timestamps, of course. And of course, to all of you, hi high rollers out there for listening. We appreciate it. And again, Austin, thanks for being here. And until next time, folks, may your games be legendary and your rolls be epic. Later.